This content is brought to you by Algorand, which is building the future of finance. Algorand is one of the leading projects in the crypto industry. It is getting significant adoption and investments. This content is also brought to you by TaxBit, which is the leading tax service provider in the crypto industry. I'm personally a TaxBit user. It makes it so easy to plug in my exchange accounts and calculate my crypto gains and losses. So if you'd like to learn more about Algorand and TaxBit, please visit the links in the description of the podcast and YouTube video. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto channel, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Credible Crypto, who's a trader, investor, and entrepreneur. Credible Crypto has a really large following on Twitter and as well as a YouTube presence where he breaks down a lot of the technical analysis around different crypto assets. Credible Crypto, great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm a big fan of your work. Been following a lot of your technical analysis and charting and so forth. I've learned a lot from you, so I'm excited to speak with you. Obviously, privacy is important to you, so I'm going to ask some questions, and you can give us as much as you're able to. But where are you from, and how did you get into trading and the crypto market as well?
Sure. So I'm from the US. I've been here my entire life, pretty much. I got into crypto about 4 or 5 years ago, kind of at the tail end of the last bull cycle when Bitcoin is rising up to 20K. I had heard about it when Bitcoin was sub $1,000. Heard about it in college. I had buddies in college that used to talk about it all the time. And for the longest time, I ignored it. And it wasn't until that tail end of the bull cycle in 2017 that I finally made my first purchase of Bitcoin, bought my first Bitcoin at $3,000 to $4,000, and the rest is pretty much history.
Wow. Were you doing trading for other assets like stocks and so forth before you started trading crypto?
Yeah, so I was actually investing in tech stocks way back when in 2016, 2017. One of my first big purchases was of Shopify, and I talk about that stock fondly because at that time, it was my favorite stock. I love what the company was doing. I was involved in e-commerce as it is, so I was very familiar with their product. And then that was one of my big, high conviction investments way back when. I bought Shopify under $50. I can't remember the exact price that I paid for it, but I got in relatively early. Obviously today, I think at least it had crossed over 1,000. I'm not sure what it's at today, but I was involved in investing in stocks to an extent, and it was definitely more long-term investing. I wasn't very much involved in technical analysis or the lower time frame stuff. It was more so based fundamental investing based on fundamental bullish thesis as opposed to what I do mostly now, which is technical analysis. So the technical analysis side of things really started heating up once I got involved in crypto.
And I'm assuming because of the volatility and the ability to make some nice returns, are you doing swing trading, leverage trading, or do you also have like a long-term hold bag that, is it split up in that way?
Yeah, so I definitely prefer longer term trading, more of a swing trader than anything. I do have 2 separate portfolios, one that I actively trade and one that I've had from the beginning a set plan for, which is invest during the bear market when the market's low, and then sell at the end of this cycle and don't touch it in between for the most part. I would say about 80% of my holdings in that portfolio have not been touched. So I've been buying them, very, very cheap and generally holding on to them. There's a couple that I've rotated out of at certain points, but for the most part, I try my best to just not touch those assets. The way I see it is that the biggest gains that many will make are going to be at the tail end of the cycle, just as they were in 2017 when Bitcoin ran from $1,000 to $20,000 in a matter of what I believe was like 2 weeks or so. So again, in 2017, leading up to that, we had about 9 to 10 months for Bitcoin to go from, I think it was like a couple of $100 to $1,000, and then within 2 to 3 weeks, we went from a couple of $1,000 to 10,000. Sorry. And then within like 2 to 3 weeks, we went from 10,000 to 20,000 and back to 10,000. And that kind of just emphasizes the idea that typically the way that these cycles end is that you get this period of euphoria and what we call a blow off top. Everyone's just tossing money in. Prices are flying off the charts. Everyone's going crazy. And you see the largest appreciation in many assets in that final 10% of the cycle. And then everything kind of collapses and resets. And so the biggest gains, I think, are going to be had for many at that tail end. And so while it's important to hold leading up to that, I think I want to take advantage of that final leg too and really, milk the cycle for all it is. And the hardest part to be able to do that, to make it to the end, is holding through the journey. And I experienced that in parts of 2017, selling things too early during that final peak run. And it's taught me that I should separate my portfolios and keep some assets from the very lows to the very highs if I can, to make those sweet, 50 to 100 X's.
For sure. Yeah, I've also learned that lesson. I do some swing trading, and I've started to segment my portfolio. I have my long-term holds. They're on a hardware wallet, and I'm waiting for higher prices. And the swing trades, I'm playing with it on Coinbase Pro and things like that. What do you hold in your crypto portfolio? And it may be a lot, so maybe you can give us your top 5 or top 10 or something like that.
Sure. So I'll give you my top picks right off the top of my head, the ones that I probably have the most invested in at the moment. And these obviously fluctuate based on price action. There was a time when, for example, XRP was my largest holding. There was a time when HBAR was my largest holding. Currently, my largest holdings are probably going to be CVX and CRV. And again, it's because it's going to change. HBAR was my largest holding when it, went up to 50 cents. It's back down to 20. Meanwhile, CRV, or even I should say CVX, has had massive price appreciation since I bought it. So it took the lead at some point. So they kind of fluctuate, but CRV, CVX, HBAR, XRP would be probably my main holdings at the moment. And then what I tend to do is I tend to invest in like few is more. So I invest in those assets that I fundamentally understand, that I technically believe have, good charts, and that I can see long-term growth in, as opposed to more of the speculative plays. Like I've never, ever even bought Doge before. I've never bought SHIB. I've never bought any of the meme coins. Well, I think that there's certainly potential for gains. They're very volatile. And because there's not too much backing them from a fundamental perspective, it can take a mental toll on you if you see the prices falling on those coins, knowing that, hey, this could be the end, because frankly, there's not much behind them. It's a lot harder to hold through the volatility. Whereas if you're invested in a coin that you understand from a fundamental perspective, that you are confident in, the more volatile swings really don't affect you much at all. So that's kind of the perspective that I have, and why I focus on a select handful of coins that I'm much more confident in fundamentally than other coins.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And meme coins are, if we're looking at risk levels, probably the most riskiest in the entire crypto asset class.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. How did you learn about technical analysis? And could you tell us about maybe any books that you recommend or anything along those lines?
Sure. So I got involved with technical analysis. I was dabbling in it a little bit back when I traded stocks, but like I said, most of my plays were long-term fundamental investments. So I really got involved with technical analysis again at the tail end of 2017, and really it's one event that made me want to learn more about it. I was learning about technical analysis, just the bare minimums, RSI, MACD, the basic stuff that everyone typically starts with. And at that time, I had invested in Bitcoin. I bought my first Bitcoin at $3,000 to $4,000. I was trying to sell it, obviously, for as much as I could get. I had the number 20K in my head for some random reason. I was talking to buddies. I was like, oh, if we can go to a few thousand from like pennies, it should be able to hit 20K very, very like nonchalantly. And then as price started moving up in that final 2 to 3 weeks up to 20K, I remember seeing, price went up from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7, and it hit like 11,000. And at the time, like I said, I was just dabbling in technicals. So I was looking at RSI, and I said, well, RSI is overbought. And what most people seem to think about RSI is that overbought means, like, again, when it's way up high, it means, oh, we're going to see a reversal soon. It can't stay overbought for that long. And then in the other sense, oversold, or when it's very low, is like, oh, it's been selling off so hard, it's so oversold, we've got to see a reversal. So based off that very basic and probably not accurate understanding of RSI, when RSI hit overbought territory, it was just shooting straight up. I said, oh, it's overbought. We must be getting a reversal soon. We've gone up to 11,000 so quickly. Let me lock in my gains. So I took a lot of profit on my initial holdings at 11,000. And then within a week, we hit 20. And so at that point, I was like, well, obviously I did something wrong. I misinterpreted the the indicators, like what made me sell before 100% rise? Like, how could I be so dumb? Like, what did I do? And then I was like, all right, you know what? Let me look more into this technical analysis thing, and let me figure out what I did wrong so I don't make that mistake again. And from that day, it just became essentially a full-time, like I spent 10 hours a day just studying technical analysis, understanding these indicators more thoroughly, understanding trend lines, support and resistance, all these aspects of technical analysis that I hadn't considered before, in an attempt to make sure that the mistake that I had made would not be made again. So that's how I got into it. And then ever since then, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've just been growing on that.
Very cool. Let's jump into specific assets and where are we at in the market cycle? And I would love for you to share your screen and maybe pull up the Bitcoin chart, and let's start there. Do you feel Bitcoin has hit its peak? Some are saying that, and now Bitcoin is going to retrace and then head into the bear market, so to speak, and then we'll have our alt season. But I think you have a different thesis. Could you walk us through that and your perspective?
Sure. So let me go ahead and I'll share my screen and open up a chart here. And I just cleaned up the chart. I'm going to use fresh charts so you guys kind of get an idea of how I approach this as opposed to an already marked up chart. But the general idea, and anyone who's been following me for a while knows that this is essentially my theory, and that is that typically we have our cycles that occur in essentially 5 wave segments. And this is typical for any market, not just Bitcoin in particular, but the idea being that at the very core of it, and we'll call this Elliott wave analysis. A lot of people get caught up with that terminology and don't quite understand Elliott wave, so they think it's terrible. They think it's like mumbo jumbo, whatever. But the reality of Elliott wave theories is just a study of market structure, and the core premise of any uptrend or downtrend is simply a series of higher highs and higher lows. Mm-hmm. So at its very core, what Elliott wave is being able to identify a series of higher highs and higher lows, as we can see here. And that is the definition of an uptrend. A definition of a downtrend being a series of lower highs and lower lows. And when I say series, it's indicative of repeating higher highs and repeating higher lows to form a trend. And then the other idea of Elliott wave theory is corrections typically are not 5-wave moves, they're 3-wave moves. And that's because we can make a high, we can make a low, we can make a higher high. But if we fail to put in a higher low and instead we break down, that's not a trend. That's typically a corrective structure within a larger trend. So that's the very, very general premise. But the idea, again, is that we're looking for a 5-wave segment if we are in a bull cycle. And so far, we've completed very clear to see 1, 2, 3, 4. We're waiting for the 5th. We can go into a lot more detail with the waves. You can look at subwave structure, which is important. A lot of people will pick up Elliott wave. They'll start using it. And it's, I would say, easy to pick up, very difficult to master, because there's certain aspects of it that you need to pay attention to. Symmetry, each wave should look relatively similar to the other in terms of time and price. And we can see that here. In fact, our first wave and our third wave both took about 6 months long. Our second and fourth waves were both about a year long. The symmetry is there. The main argument that I see is that we actually completed our 5th wave here. And this is where kind of understanding Elliott wave and being very familiar with it helps, because you could look at this and say, well, the symmetry is off. You can just tell typically in crypto, we get these blow off tops at the end of our cycles. And that usually means that the 5th wave is the longest and the strongest. You can see here, the first wave was long, the third wave was longer. The 5th wave was incredibly short relative to both of these. The symmetry isn't there. The 4th wave was incredibly short relative to the second. Again, the symmetry isn't there. But all of a sudden, if you simply take this and we extend it out, the 4th all of a sudden becomes a lot more symmetrical. The 5th makes a lot more, it all just makes a lot more sense. And of course, there's more to it, but that's just a very broad gist of it. So no, I don't think that the bull market is over. For me, it's almost like I have trouble saying that the bull market is over when we haven't even made a lower low. We have a high, we have a very pronounced low, we have a very pronounced higher high, and this is just sideways action. So how this is being construed as a bear market or a downtrend already when we haven't even broken market structure is the issue that I have with saying that we're in a bear market.
Now, is the issue, because I've seen other folks use Elliott wave, I've seen other folks use Fibonacci. Is it the models that where you have the divergence between the different analysts and the different thesis?
Yeah, I think, I've said this many times, it doesn't matter to me what form of analysis you use. Like if you can look up at the stars and know where Bitcoin's going, then that's all the more power to you. I'm not going to hate on you for doing that. My preferred method of analysis, what I've experienced over the last 4 years in the markets, have told me that certain methods tend to be more effective. I've just had more success with them. I've seen them play out more often. And for certain methods, I haven't seen that success. And that's all it really is for me, is I tend to lean towards methods that have been proven correct in the past for myself. This may not always be the case with other analysts and their analysis, but again, it's always just plenty of people have different opinions, and all that respect to them. Nothing against that. This is just the way that I see things and what I've seen to be working for me in the past.
Sure. So using the Elliott wave model here, what are you seeing for 2022 for Bitcoin? Are we heading towards 100K towards the end of the year, or will this spill over into 2023? What are your thoughts there?
Sure. So again, this is a clean chart, so you're not going to see it here, but a while back, and this was back when we were trading at about 5K, and I've shared this chart on Twitter, and many have probably seen it, but back when we were trading here at 5K, I basically posted a projection based on the long-term cycles of Bitcoin and what we've seen since inception. And basically what we have here is essentially like a log growth curve is what it looks like right now. And so based on that idea, we can see that from peak to peak, every major peak that we have that's been followed by an 80 to 90% drawdown, each peak to peak has taken a longer amount of time, which is one thing that we've noted. And the second thing that we've noted is that your ROI off the lows to the highs in every peak to peak or every trough to peak have decreased. And these are both very natural, normal things that we'd expect with a maturing asset. As with any investment, the initial investors, the guys who get in the earliest, are going to get the highest ROI. And as the asset becomes more mature and more investors enter the space, the volatility decreases and ROI decreases, and the movements generally take longer to play out. So that thesis is very straightforward and applies to most assets. With that in mind, the projection was, back when I made that chart, that we'd probably top sometime after 2022 at least, and potentially in 2023. Since then, based off of what we've been seeing, it looks like we're moving a little bit quicker than that projection. And so my expectation now is that we probably top sometime in 2022. Again, just based off the idea that this first wave and this third wave took about 6 months each, that gives us a rough idea that when the fifth wave starts, it's going to take probably about 6 months, give or take 1 or 2. So I can pretty safely say that we'll probably see the end of the top of Bitcoin in the second half of 2022, potentially pushing into 2023, but I'm not too confident about that. And then the next thing to remind ourselves of is that, and I've posted charts on this as well, in past cycles, typically once Bitcoin has peaked, we've seen distribution on Bitcoin and money flowing into alts for one final hurrah on alts. So while Bitcoin may peak in the second half of 2022, it doesn't necessarily mean that alts may peak. Alts may continue to pop for months after that. So we may see Bitcoin peak the second half of 22 and then maybe alts peak in 2023. The other thing that I've noted is that we're getting to a point of market maturity where we're getting sectors of alts popping and having their own little cycles. So in the last cycle, it was kind of like everything kind of popped at the same time. All the alts moved up at the same time. Most of the alts crashed at the same time. We had a couple of outliers like Link, which kind of ran from 2017 up to 2020 and then has been correcting since. So in that sense, I think that I can't generally say, like, generalize everything and say that all alts will top, late 2022 or early 2023, because I think we're going to see cycles where some may have already topped, some will continue to top over the coming months, some are going to top, after Bitcoin tops. So it's going to be a little bit more variable this time as the market develops and matures.
Now, aside from the charts, are you looking at some of the events that are happening in the world? For example, the media hype, the euphoria. I haven't seen that from what I saw in 2017. Do you take into account those factors as well?
Yeah, so I take into account those factors, but more from like a long-term fundamental perspective, with the idea that all these events are great for the long-term thesis of Bitcoin and crypto in general. All this adoption, all this growth is absolutely spectacular for the long-term growth of the sector. However, in the short term, and we're kind of getting away from this, like I said, the markets are maturing a bit, but in the immediate short to midterm, most of the price action, most of the movement is determined by psychological investment from the market and market participants, as opposed to these fundamental events. And kind of a good way to kind of demonstrate this is that if we look back to 2011 and then move forward from there, I think it's pretty safe to say that from peak to peak, the fundamentals, like it's not like at June of 2011, fundamentals were super strong and then the fundamentals became terrible and then they became even better and then the fundamentals got worse, causing price to fall. And then they became super great in 2017, but in 2018, the fundamentals were terrible. So the price, it's not like that, right? We know that from 2017 to now, even during the bear market, the fundamentals have been strengthening over time. And that's kind of what we've seen for the entirety of Bitcoin. As Bitcoin gets older and more mature and more investors participate and more adoption occurs, the fundamentals simply just get stronger over time. But again, price right now is not necessarily a function solely of fundamentals, which is why we get these massive price swings, because the markets are still so small that the emotional investment and the stuff, the euphoria and the greed still play major roles in the type of price action that we see. So it's not, fundamentals aren't something that I'll necessarily take into account day to day, but for the big picture, for the long term, over many years, it's definitely something that I'm paying attention to.
For sure. What are your thoughts on the high correlation between the stock markets and crypto? Is it because of the institutional money now here and they're de-risking or deleveraging at the same time for both?
Yeah, so I've talked a little bit about this, and I think that there's a lot of focus on these other aspects, and I see, like, even very recently, the idea was, what's Bitcoin going to do? Let's look at the SPX. What's Bitcoin going to do? Let's look at the NASDAQ, right? And I'm just like, let's just look at the Bitcoin chart. Like, you want to know what Bitcoin's going to do? Look at the Bitcoin chart. If any outside factors, because again, there's 1,000 factors that could be affecting Bitcoin realistically. And to what extent they affect it is very subjective, and it's not something that we can typically determine. So if something's affecting Bitcoin, it's going to be reflected in the Bitcoin chart. Right. So if we start breaking down major supports, then maybe there's some fundamental event out there in the grand scheme of things that is affecting Bitcoin negatively. If we start recovering and reclaiming key supports, then maybe there's something out there fundamentally that's affecting Bitcoin positively. But to be able to narrow that down to one specific event and the impact that one specific event may have is tricky, especially because Bitcoin's a global asset, right? It's not necessarily correlated to events of the US or correlated to events of China or to India. I mean, we've seen how many times China has banned Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has never died and recovered, and India's banned Bitcoin, and the US has done this and that. And there's all kinds of factors out there, and it's just very difficult to be able to narrow it down and say, okay, this factor caused, like a 100-point move on Bitcoin, or this factor caused Bitcoin to drop $5,000, because we like to think it's this factor, but who knows what it could be, and there's no way to actually prove that. There's been periods of correlation with the traditional markets, but there's also been periods where, and I can't pull it up now, but I've talked about this as well, periods where they don't correlate, perfectly, where one's going up and one's going down, and so I take that with a grain of salt, and I focus more on what I'm seeing right now on the chart, something that I know, is concrete. The price is here. The price lost key areas of support, the price, gained key areas of resistance, stuff like that I can objectively analyze.
Now, in the short term, maybe in the next couple of months or so, you see we're still moving sideways with Bitcoin, finding a bottom again, and before we start heading upwards?
Correct. So, and I talked about this, I made a recent 8-minute video clip that I shared on Twitter. And basically the idea that I proposed was that typically before our major impulses, again, this was our first major impulse here, and then we had our this was our first major impulse here, and then we had our third impulse here. Typically before those impulses occur, we get a little bit of a basing, right? So we saw that here before the first major wave. We saw that here before the third major wave. And during these basing periods, it doesn't look like much. It looks like sideways action. Typically, many at this point are conditioned to expect lower prices. And then we have these key areas of resistance that many are expecting rejection at. So when we do get some relief, the immediate thought is, let's short it. We're going to go lower. And you can see here that these are key areas of resistance that one would expect would act as resistance. And we, instead of rejecting off them and falling lower, we consolidated and then just melted right through them. And then the same occurred here with our major third wave. Again, we consolidated here for about a month after putting in our bottom here. Again, this is going to be the key level of resistance right here. So you'd expect the rejection. We pushed up to it, consolidated, and then ripped through. And then typically by this point, by the time you realize that we're ramping up for an impulse, we're already halfway through it. And the bottom here was at 3K, and now we're over 6,000. We've already gone up 100%. Down here, the bottom was at 10,000. By the time you can safely say, okay, maybe we are headed up, it's probably when we're breaking this level here at 12 or 13,000, or maybe you're waiting for a break of 14,000 for confirmation, or maybe you're even waiting for a break of 20,000 for confirmation, because that was the old highs. So by the time you're confident that we're headed higher, we're already well on our way. And so while we do see some sideways action right now, and this is kind of what I'm expecting, and I've talked about this, I expect these lows to hold, right? That's my thesis, is that we're seeing a Elliott wave corrective structure, which is just a high, a higher, a low, a higher high, a higher low, and the continuation, right? A simple basic trend. But the idea is that these lows here at 29,000, I expect to hold. We can already identify the very key level of resistance that we can see, which is basically this level right here. And you can see how acted as support, and then we lost it. So the idea that this area should act as resistance is going to be a very common one. Many people are going to try to short this region most likely. And what I'm looking for is consolidation, a move up here, and then a breakthrough and continuation of the upside. Once we do that, I'll assume that we're well on our way for our major fifth wave. And then we're looking at essentially up only for about 6+ months.
Wow. Well, I'm certainly hoping this scenario plays out. That will make me very happy, and my portfolio will look amazing. Let's talk about some alts. There's folks who want to know, what's your thoughts on Ethereum's next move, obviously in context of what you just said, potential price predictions, and as well as for XRP, HBAR, and CRV.
Sure. So let me jump into that. I want to make one more comment on this, because this is quite important. Sure. I've talked about the running flat idea, and for that to be valid, we can't breach 29K. There's been other ideas proposed that we break these lows, come down here, and then go up to 100K plus, and that's technically valid. And I have people asking me all the time, Credible, you're always bullish. When will you be bearish? What needs to happen for you to become a bear? Like, we certainly can't be bearish or can't be bullish if we lose 28K. And again, it just comes back to zoom out. We have a high, we have a low, we have a higher high. Even if we lose these lows, this is still sideways action, and we have a higher low, right? In the grand scheme of things, market structure on the biggest of scales has not been broken. Do I think it's going to happen? No. But if we do lose these levels, I'm expecting the same that many others are, a move down to this region here and then continuation. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. It's not my primary. But the point mainly is that, no, I'm not going to be selling everything if we lose 29K. I'm not going to be selling everything after a 50% dip. It could possibly happen, but it doesn't change the high time frame macro picture, the high time frame outlook, and it just means that some are going to get a little bit of a better price on Bitcoin. And at the same time, again, I talked about this as well. If you are of the belief that this is likely, that we might hit 25 to 28K, but that we're going to recover after and head on to new all-time highs, then what's stopping you from buying at 32K? Like if you're waiting for 3,000 or 4,000 less and followed by a $60,000 move to the upside, I mean, is it really worth waiting at that point when you're down here at 32 to 34K? Because if you miss it and it never comes, again, this is resistance. You're not going to be buying here. You're going to be buying once this level is reclaimed. So you're buying now here at close to 50K, once this level is reclaimed. So either you're waiting for a $2,000 to $3,000 move lower here, or you have to wait for like $15,000 up to buy, and then you've already missed, a big chunk. So it's like risk to reward again, right? That's kind of the way I see it. But anyways, that's my little note here on Bitcoin. Let's jump into some of the other popular coins. I'll start with CRV, one of my favorites right now. So again, crypto's volatile, and again, the volatility tends to freak people out and often makes them sell or panic sell at what is likely a great place to be buying. And I've been talking about CRV since it was down at these levels, like sub $2. And that's when I started buying. I increased my position substantially between 2 to 3, somewhere like around here. From there, we went up to about 650. And then now we've seen a pretty large correction with the rest of the market. And again, people freaking out. And again, I'm just like, we have to focus on what we have here. And if you look at it from a very high time frame perspective, this is a key level of support, and this is a key level of support because it's the level at which we broke to the upside and broke market structure to the upside in an aggressive manner. This is also a key level of resistance, so it was a flip of that level. And all we have here is we have a drop into this level, and then we have a pushback up, and then we have another drop, and the lows have been taken, which is generally a bullish sign, and we're holding support. So to be bearish here at $3 doesn't make much sense. Other people are like, oh, well, you were bullish at 6. Yeah, because I'm talking high time frame. I'm looking at the end of the cycle. I'm bullish until we hit double digits at least, because I'm viewing this from a high time frame perspective. Can we see short-term volatility? Absolutely. Was I expecting a major drop from that level down to sub $3? I certainly was not. But that has never been what I'm focused on. I'm focused on where is this going to be 6 months down the road. And so again, I've talked about this again in more detail on my Twitter page, but in terms of wave structure here, essentially what I think is happening here and what seems to make a lot of sense to me is that once again, we're forming a running flat, similar to what we have on Bitcoin, actually. And from a wave perspective, we just have our first major wave here on CRV. This is a running flat wave 2, whereas on Bitcoin, it's a wave 4. And then I expect a third, a fourth, and a fifth to the upside. Again, double digits at the bare minimum is what I'm looking for, and upwards of $20 and potentially to $40. And those are my higher time frame end of cycle targets. The other thing to note is that obviously, or I should say generally, I won't say obviously, but obvious or mostly, the third wave is typically longer than the first. So if the first took us from pennies to $5, the third is probably going to be some multiple of $5, $5 or $10 long, for example. Off of a low of $3, you're looking at 10 plus, maybe 10 to 15 bucks for the end of the third. Fourth wave consolidation, and then again the final fifth wave, which is typically going to be even larger than the third. And we can go back and look at alts in 2017 and see exactly this. But the point being that when I say double digits or $20 to $40, it sounds insane. But in 2017, when XRP was trading at 20 cents, $2 sounded insane, and we went to 350. So you have to think in perspective of again how small the space is and how little money it takes to move these assets. They're still very, very young. And so it sounds crazy right now, but again, I think many will see at the tail end of the cycle when alts are going absolutely nuts, you're going to see massive pumps across the board. So that's my expectation for CRV. I think we very well could be putting in a bottom here, and this very well could have been our bottom. From a wave perspective, I've broken down the subwaves of this structure on my Twitter, and I've posted a lot of information on why I think that this move may be complete. For confirmation on CRV, we need to see a reclaim of this level right here. And if we can reclaim this level right here, then we essentially, in my eyes, have confirmation that the drop is now complete. So for those that are worried about continuation of the downside, the logical thing would be to sell some of your holdings. Again, this is not necessarily what I'm doing. It's just the way that you should be approaching this. If you're concerned about further downside, if you think you can't sustain a drop below $3 again because it's going to cause you too much emotional strain, then your best bet is to de-risk some of your CRV here within the $4 to $5 range, and then rebuy if this level is reclaimed. That way, if we do reject and we do head down, you avoid the downside, you maybe have some ammo to buy the dip. And if we reclaim, you buy a little bit higher, but you have the comfort of knowing that the drop is probably complete. For others, you don't necessarily need to do that. If you've put these assets in your holding portfolio like I have and I'm not touching them, then it doesn't make sense for me to attempt something like that in my HODL portfolio. So that's CRV, and those are my expectations. This is the key region that I think we should be focusing on going forward. Let's take a look at HBAR, because I know that's also very popular and one of my favorite coins as well from a fundamental perspective. And HBAR, again, it's another coin where it's like you really need to zoom out, because this looks crazy and it looks scary, but the reality of the situation is that we're probably just in our larger fourth wave. Again, like Bitcoin, we have one wave, we have a corrective structure, we have a second wave, we have a corrective structure. Again, actually, this looks like a lot like Bitcoin, because we have that move above the highs, we have that drop that's made a higher low. Looks very similar to Bitcoin. And with HBAR, again, key levels that I'm watching, this was a key level back when before we went to all-time highs. A key level that I was looking at right over here. Again, this is the level from which we exploded to the upside, so a key level of demand. And you can see we got these repeated sweeps of these lows, which some will call like a 3 drives pattern is what some technical analysts will call it. But basically repeated pushes into a key area of support. and then strong wicks closing back above those levels to indicate that buyers are stepping in. And I posted a chart back then as well. We're pushing into weekly support with major swings or 3 drives into this region. That looks bullish to me. It looks like buyers are absorbing HBAR at these levels. And then from there, we went up to make new all-time highs. From there, obviously, we corrected. I was not expecting such a drastic correction to occur, but it happened. And now, again, we're kind of seeing something similar. Once again, we have these key swing lows that have been formed, and we're seeing repeated sweeps of these lows, into another key area of support, just like we saw back here. And so once again, I think that we're probably basing out and getting ready for the next leg to the upside. Again, this is kind of my expectation for most of the market, and most of the market will generally follow Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's going to fall down to 25 to 28K, alts are going to take a hit for the most part, right? But assuming that our low is in and that we're not going to drop below 29K, like I said, I would assume that our low is probably on most of these alts. And so now I'm just looking for key reclaims, key recoveries of levels that tell me that, this is now a higher likelihood that the bottom is in. Do I think the bottom is in or very close to in? Yes. Do I think we're going to make a lower low on HBAR? No. But again, just like with CRV, if you want to wait for confirmation, and what you want to see for confirmation is reclamation of certain key levels. And for HBAR, that level is a 25 to 30 cent region. And if we manage to reclaim this level, then essentially what I'm then looking for is some time spent here and then break up to new all-time highs. And like I said, the biggest moves are the fifth waves, the blow-off tops of the fifth waves. And generally, consolidation precedes expansion. The longer the consolidation, the greater the expansion. Back here, when we went from 3 cents to 30 plus, we had about a year of consolidation that led to a 10x. We've now got another year of consolidation, and now again, we're entering the tail end of the cycle where new money will probably be flowing in, and investors will be euphoric, and more money than we've ever seen will probably be flowing into these markets. So the moves that follow these levels of expansion will, for all intents and purposes, probably outdo the moves that follow these levels of expansion, right? Because we're getting into a market stage where there's more money flowing in. So a 10x from these levels at 20 cents sounds crazy, but literally we did that here after a similar amount of consolidation. I think we're probably going to do it again. So I've been saying for a while, my end of the cycle targets for HBAR, $2 to $5. And I've been saying that since 3 cents, and I haven't changed and I haven't budged on that. I still expect that. And a lot of people, again, are like, that's never going to happen. And I'm just like, well, we'll wait and we'll see. And if it doesn't, I'll be wrong. And if it does, I'll be right. So I'm still definitely expecting that. I think it's very feasible. Let's put it that way. So that's HBAR right there. You have any questions thus far? I know I've been talking a lot.
No, this is great. And this is exactly the content that folks want to hear. So I don't have any questions. It totally makes sense. And I think if we can hit XRP and then ETH and what you have for those as well.
Perfect. So let's move on to XRP. XRP is one that doesn't look that great right now. On my last update on Twitter about it, I posted and I said that I think that we're probably going to go for these lows here and push into, again, this is the weekly chart. So these are high time frame levels, but potentially push into this weekly level of demand that we have here. And again, this level is significant because from this level, we saw a major move to the upside after what was essentially November, December, January, February, about 6 months of consolidation, right? So the origin or the point at which this consolidation structure breaks, whether that be to the upside or the downside, typically then acts as support or resistance when it's revisited. So just from a high time frame perspective, you can expect that this region in general, the tighter we get here, this general region is going to act as support as we've seen it act in the past. And this specific place is kind of the apex of this consolidation or the focal point of support. So what I'm looking for again is a potential sweep of the lows here at 52 cents, a dip into this region here, and then a reversal. And the only reason that I'm looking for a little bit lower on XRP when I'm not looking for a lower low on Bitcoin or I'm not looking for a lower low on HBAR or CRV is because of the way that the XRP Bitcoin chart looks. And this is the only thing that makes me think that we may see a little bit more weakness in XRP USD before we get our major relief. And I could be wrong again, but essentially what I'm seeing here, if we go to the lower timeframes, you can see that we kind of have like almost like what some will call like a bouncing ball type of structure here, or what others will call like a descending triangle, right? And essentially what we have is we have a series of lower highs and equal lows. at a key area of support. So in the high time frame, this region here, and we can see it's acted as support, but in the high time frame, this region just in general is a very significant area of support. And then it was lost, and then it was reclaimed. It even acted as resistance right here after it was initially lost, right? And then we reclaimed it, and then it acted as support. But we made a lower high, and then it acted as support again. But we made a lower high, and now it's acting as support again. So the idea is that if we don't have the strength to break these consecutive lower highs, the amount of buyers that were willing to buy at this level are decreasing with every test. When price revisits this level, buyers step in. If you have 10 buyers, maybe 4 buyers step in here. You have 6 buyers left. Price revisits again. Now 4 more buyers step in. You have 2 buyers left. Price revisits it again. You're down to those last 2 buyers, and eventually that demand or that buying interest at this level fails. And then we see a breakdown, right? And then we may see something like this to this key area of demand that led to this major move to the upside. So we may see a temporary short-term drop on this pairing. And this basically means that XRP may fall in relation to Bitcoin. And this is about a, let's see here, about a 30% drop, right? So that temporary weakness that we may see in XRP is why I think that XRP USD may see some temporary weakness. In fact, it's dropping quite a bit right now. So may see some temporary weakness that gets us to sub 50 cents one last time to take these key swing lows, dip into this key area of support where more buyers are likely to step in. And then ideally, that is where we can formulate our reversal back to the upside. And once we do that, I think once we get that reversal, you have a lot of unswept highs here, a lot of liquidity resting to the upside, and price should aggressively move up, I think, back to these highs, back to over $1, and then ideally continuation as we round up this cycle. So that's my expectation on XRP, meaning a little bit more weakness here in the short term against most alts, but I think that's temporary until we base out here. And then I think we'll see good performance from XRP as well.
Do you have a peak cycle price target?
Yeah, so I've talked about in the past $20 to $30 being the peak, and this was before all the SEC shenanigans happened, and that's certainly affected XRP in the short to midterm. And this kind of goes in along with the idea that we're going to be seeing different cycles on different coins. So now, when I say XRP at the end of cycle $20 to $30. It can confuse some because I'm no longer talking. We've seen XRP sluggish for so long and essentially delayed for so long from the move to the upside that I no longer expect it to kind of move along with Bitcoin. I don't expect that correlation to occur. In fact, in 2017, XRP kind of stayed at the bottom and then erupted right in the last month of 2017, right when Bitcoin had topped, and XRP then saw the greatest gains. And so I'm kind of expecting something similar where I can't necessarily say that XRP will hit those targets, when Bitcoin tops. I don't think that's going to happen at this point. What I do think will happen is that, again, I think XRP is now essentially going to be working on its own cycle. And so when Bitcoin may top end of 2022, and like I said, some alts will continue to pop into 2023. And I think XRP will be one of those alts. And so when I say end of XRP cycle, it's going to take a lot longer. I think it's going to push into 2023 most likely, but those upside targets haven't really changed. It's just that the idea of the cycle moving with Bitcoin has changed. And I think that when I say cycle now, I mean XRP's independent cycle. And there's other coins like Link is a very good example. I don't want to get too much into it, but Link is one coin that I think is really working on its own cycle. You can go look at the charts. 2017, December of 2017, Link launches somewhere around there. Link runs up from that point literally till 2020 for 2 years. And I remember too, during the bear market, everything was falling and Link was just up. And it was like, what is going on?
I traded that and made some nice money off of that because it was going on its own, like you said.
Yeah, it had a mind of its own, right? Like literally nothing in the market was doing what Link was doing, right? And then in 2020, it tops and it's been falling essentially ever since. And again, you're going to hear the same stuff. Oh, Link is dead. Link is never going to recover. All the fundamentals go out the window. All of a sudden, the fantastic fundamentals that it had, up to 2020 had now become terrible fundamentals. Like that's how the psychology changes people, right? They see what they want to see. And so, no, I don't think Link is dead, but I do think that Link may have potentially topped for its cycle. It ran for 2 years straight, and everything that runs like that has to cool off. So I think Link, like the same way that it was running during the entire bear cycle, I think it may continue to bleed during the rest of the bull cycle. There's a chance that happens. And in that sense, I think it's kind of working on its own cycle now. And now I see the same thing occurring for essentially XRP. So, and the reason why I still hold such a massive amount of XRP, despite the sluggish price action, is that I now kind of see it as a hedge against the rest of the market. In that, if this SEC lawsuit ends, and I think it will, I don't know when, I have no idea when, but I think that it'll end ultimately favorably for Ripple and XRP. But when it does end, XRP will be essentially the only crypto asset with regulatory clarity in the United States. And so, and then on the other side of that is that if Ripple loses this lawsuit, if XRP, doesn't come out of this positively for the United States, I have a very hard time imagining any other crypto coin in the space succeeding against the SEC. When you're fighting a case that seems to be this corrupt, this ridiculous, if Ripple, who has the biggest war chest of any cryptocurrency in the space right now, can't defeat the SEC, even with all the facts and logic behind the case that tell us that this should be an open and closed case. If they can't do it, then good luck to anyone else out there, And at that point, we have bigger problems to worry about.
Sure.
If they can do it, if they can succeed and they do win this lawsuit, or it is settled favorably in their favor, then XRP has clarity, and literally everything else is now at the mercy of the SEC, right? So that's why I hold it, because I don't want to be in a position where the case is settled. And again, when the case does get settled, you can expect XRP price to absolutely pop, right? So if you're waiting to hear the outcome of the case to jump in, you're going to be too late, right? So you're placing your bets right now. And if the bet pays off and XRP wins, XRP is going to rocket, and then everything else is at the mercy of the SEC, and we don't know what's going to happen. And if XRP doesn't succeed, then again, we have bigger problems to worry about. So I kind of hold it now as a hedge, in that if they succeed, they'll be unique to the entire space.
Very interesting thesis there. And I think I've been thinking along the same lines as well, given the situation and the clarity, as you mentioned. I have a huge XRP bag as well, my number one holding, along with Bitcoin and others. Very cool. So Credible, in a sense of time, I think we can maybe hit the wrap-up questions. And this is all great stuff. So thank you so much for going through the charts here. For the wrap-up questions, if you were to create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
This is interesting. I haven't thought much about it. I will say, I think that's a tough one, I think it's cool to have just like a avatar that represents you in the metaverse. I think kind of like what Facebook is trying to do. That seems kind of cool. But at the same time, the fun of the metaverse and the fun of all the excitement that comes from it is being something that you can do whatever you want, right? That's where a lot of the excitement from this metaverse comes from. So it would be hard for me to say how I would envision it, but yeah, I mean, it's you can do so much with the space. It's crazy, but something that allows anyone to express themselves obviously would be ideal. I think would bring the most enjoyment out of something like the metaverse. Yeah, I honestly haven't thought much about it, but just something that's exciting and fun, and that everyone can express themselves in whatever way they want to.
For sure. Some rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Favorite food? I like food too much to choose one favorite food. Honestly, any cuisine. I'm not a fan of seafood, but anything besides seafood, any cuisine I love.
Favorite musician or band?
Again, I love all kinds of music, but over the last few years, one song that kind of hypes me up every time I hear it, because it's always with my boys and we always have a great time. Mr. Brightside by The Killers.
Love The Killers.
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie, again, another tough one. I have to say that one of the best movies I've ever seen. Super, super sad movie, and that's why I don't watch it all the time, but just fantastic acting, everything. The Titanic, anything with Leonardo, I love him as an actor. So anything he's in, I love. And the Titanic was just an epic, although sad movie. So
for sure. Favorite book?
Favorite book, another tough one, because I haven't been reading much lately. When I was younger, I used to read all the time. Lately, I haven't been reading much, so it's going to be a tough one. I will say my favorite books when I was younger, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, was a series called Pendragon. And it's interesting because they actually had one book that talked about this idea of people going to sleep and kind of living like in this metaverse sort of thing, which kind of leads back to where we are today. So that was kind of cool to see. So yeah.
For sure. And when you're not doing technical analysis and things like that, what are you doing for fun as a hobby?
I like to spend time with friends. I like to go to the gym. I like to travel. I really love to travel, and that's something that I really want to do a lot more of. And I was planning on it, but then COVID hit, so that's caused a lot of issues with those plans. But as soon as things open up, I'm going to be traveling a lot more. That's something that I've been wanting to do for years, ever since I graduated college. And I did a little bit of traveling, but now I have the means to do a lot more traveling. So that's probably my biggest favorite pastime.
Awesome. Well, Credible, great chatting with you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I always learn something when I listen to you speak and looking at your charts and technical analysis. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Sonny. Thanks for having me on.